the hero we all know and love. Some may call him generic, and others an inspirational character that invigorates everyone around him. And yes, I'm talking about the main character today, Tanjiro Kamado. I want to kind of do this differently and not just analyze one particular version of Tanjiro, but how strong he is from the beginning of the series until the very end. I think this will be a fun one. I'll call this a comprehensive scaling of Tanjiro. With that being said, welcome to another episode of Analyzing These Animes. I'm your host, Liquid Zero. Please go ahead and subscribe and hit that like button. I would really appreciate it, as it will continue to help the channel grow and keep me making this type of content. When we're introduced to Tanjiro at the start of the story, it's established that he's pretty trash, as he hasn't had any formal training as a demon slayer, or really a fighter in general, until he learns the water breathing style. He goes through his training and eventually learns the basics of a demon slayer. How to use a sword, how to breathe correctly, which is explained that if you breathe correctly, it allows you to enhance organs, muscles, bones, basically your entire body. And finally, the water style breathing technique forms. When he faces the hand demon during the selection, it's established that this is a real demon, not just one that was transformed that week, but this one is a real threat. This punk has been on this hill for 47 years and has been devouring aspiring demon slayers the whole time. Tanjiro struggles at first, but once he unleashes his total concentration breathing with water breathing, he's able to dispose of him, almost traumatizing the hand demon and thinking that Tanjiro's actually Sankoji. Next, Tanjiro goes on what I call the pre-Rui Fight Club tour. By that I mean the demons become stronger linearly as he continues on his path until he runs into the spider demon family, which is the biggest roadblock in the story at that point. Anyway, the strongest opponent he fights is the drum demon, who is the former Lower Moon 6. He is confirmed very powerful at this point in the story, as it's established Muzan has stripped him of his rank, and he is constantly trying to become stronger so he can get his spot back among the 12 moons. This fight was tactically as well as fighting wise Tanjiro's hardest battle up until this point, as he was not only strong, but in order to even touch him, Tanjiro needed to figure out how to deal with his flipping the room gimmick. He's able to defeat the drum demon while also defending the inhabitants of the castle. Tanjiro is able to deal with the crazy speed and power amps the demon gets as he becomes enraged. Tanjiro is gaining the power to see, breathe, hear, and react to strong opponents in real time, as a proof of concept for how strong he will become. Jumping to the spider demon family, when Tanjiro faces off against Rui, he is so outclassed that his sword breaks. He gets flung across the battlefield, and none of the water style breathing techniques will work. At this point in the story, this is the biggest power gap from an enemy that the main cast faces, besides Muzan himself. However, they didn't really have a battle, so honestly it shouldn't count. Tanjiro is only able to damage Rui when it isn't really new in the first time it's ever been used by a character. As going by the flashbacks, his new power is a dance that his father performed, which is the first time we see the Hinokami Kagura, aka sun breathing. Since sun breathing is the strongest breathing style, and Tanjiro still being at the beginning stages of a demon slayer with no mark, it causes intense strain on him, basically rendering him immobile and in pain for a period of time. You can look at this consequence as a trade-off in order to obtain the power to slay a god. Luckily, the goat Giyu comes and finishes off Rui, but the biggest takeaway from here is that Tanjiro's strength increased a ridiculous amount, previously being unable to even break the skin to having the potential to completely wipe out a member of the 12 moons, even if it is only for a limited amount of time. The next jump in power actually comes from the rehabilitation / total concentration breathing training that they did with Shinobu and her girls. It should be obvious, but mastering this is the only way that Tanjiro is going to be able to sun breathe properly and not pass out after one-time use. They had them train this by blowing into gourds and to never stop using the skill even while they sleep. As he becomes more fluent in total concentration breathing, he's finally able to defeat Kanao in the reflex game and the speed test. Post-training, Tanjiro is probably about as strong as Lower Moon 1 without the amps that Dream Boy Enmu got, which when you think about it is a gigantic jump from barely being able to beat number 5, and even then he needed help from his sister, and Giyu is the one that lands the killing blow anyway. Speaking of Enmu, let's jump to the Mugen Train arc. Once Tanjiro figures out how to stop his dream state, and by that I mean he ends himself. Also, I wanted to say his mental fortitude to be able to do that and only really almost mess up one time is pretty remarkable. Not only that, but he is able to instantly switch back into a combat state in order to continue the pursuit of the demon. Anyway, he immediately chops off Enmu's head. However, we soon found out that this is not his main body, and it's the entire train that is his body. Inosuke and Tanjiro fight off the train limbs, or whatever you want to call it, in the search of Enmu's real neck. Inosuke ignores Tanjiro and just strikes the below him and finds the neck, but it's protected by Enmu's morphing body part. They deal with that for the most part, and Tanjiro gets stabbed by the conductor, who's acting like he's coming down with withdrawals after Enmu had hooked on the dreams. Tanjiro pushes Buddy to the side and he jumps and unleashes a fresh Hinokami Kagura and destroys Enmu. I'm going to add my own 2 cents here. I believe Tanjiro isn't completely paralyzed and now he can fire more than one sun-breathing form attack. I think he's only down now because of his injuries, since he was stabbed in a pretty bad spot. Eventually he gets up anyway once Kyojiro is on his last legs. There are 2 things to take away here. He's confirmed way stronger than before, since he is able to take down a demon with pretty much the equivalence of all lower moons combined, and he can perform sun breathing without collapsing from just one attack. Before the entertainment district arc, there is some brief training, but it's not really expounded upon, so I can't really scale or point out how much stronger they become, but it definitely added something. So I just wanted to note that. When Tanjiro encounters Daki, the power gap is pretty high, and you have to remember this is prior to her even gaining the white hair. She's destroying the buildings around her with relative ease, using her demon sash. Tanjiro eventually goes into a dialogue about how water breathing doesn't suit him, and he isn't smooth enough for it to be effective enough to not damage his own blade. Alright, so let me gas the boy Tanjiro a little bit. My man went from one stroke Tanji to the multi-pump king in his fight versus Daki. I'm not going to count the strikes, at least in the anime, since it will be a bit more exaggerated, but it's enough to where he would basically run over anyone from Lower Moon 1 to 6. He eventually runs out of stamina and his sister has to save him, but yeah. On to the fight with Gyutaro. Tanjiro jumps in with a grand entrance in front of Tengen like he was about to be the deciding factor, and sadly he is mistaken, at least in this part of the fight. Gyutaro is much stronger than the current Tanjiro, even with the multi-strike Hinokami Kagura. For the majority of the first part, Tanjiro is regulated to defensive and decoy duty. Eventually Gyutaro gets tapped by the poison kunai for the first time. They almost get to his head, but they are unable to take him down. Tanjiro does use a water breathing and sun breathing mix to help free the Kanochi, who unleashes the kunais, as she was Gyutaro's first target after he had escaped. Which the mix kind of showcases how future breathing styles deviated from the original, and then you have the others deviating from the ones that came from those. You can tell Tanjiro is becoming stronger as this battle progresses because he's able to actually damage Daki and to weaken Gyutaro with water breathing. Inosuke hilariously takes Daki's head after that, but she isn't dead since both of the demon siblings need to be beheaded at the same time. But yeah, Gyutaro comes back for his sister and goes berserk. Tanjiro barely avoids the hit because Zenitsu pushes him off the roof. Gyutaro starts trolling Tanjiro and snaps his finger and then gives him the chance to become a demon, because he sees himself in Tanjiro in some weird sadistic way. Tanjiro cocks his head back and gives a vicious headbutt, but what he really did was stab him in the leg with one of those poison kunais, which is a really good showing for him, as it shows how much better Tanjiro has become at least battle awareness. He didn't panic despite the deck being heavily stacked against him. He swings down on Gyutaro's neck, and yeah, it doesn't work, but Tengen comes back with a motivational line and they re-engage in combat as Gyutaro's power have returned completely. Tanjiro gets stabbed in the mouth, and we finally get to the most important part about the whole arc and Tanjiro's development and really the whole story, because without it, no way in hell were they going to beat any of the Upper Moons. Tanjiro unlocks the Demon Slayer mark and gains the power to finish off Upper Moon 6 and slice off his head. I pointed this out in my Demon Slayer mark video, and if you want to check that out, you can. I'll link it up here. It didn't really get that many views, but what I was going to say is that sun breathing causes the Demon Slayer mark to manifest. The more and more it performs, the more than likely chance that the user and those around it will start to manifest the mark. And in the entertainment district arc, the whole time he's using sun breathing, so I believe that is what causes the manifestation. There's no real other logical reason I could think of. Yurichi's born with the mark, and then Tanjiro gets it after he does sun breathing that he learned from his father, who learned it from his relative or ancestor who got it from Yurichi. So yeah. In the Swordsman Village arc, Tanjiro begins training on the Yurichi doll robot, or whatever you want to call it, in order to hone his skills, since the 6 arms are meant to mimic just how insane Yurichi's power was at the time. Once this is done, they start building him a new sword using the one that was found in the body of the doll. which this being Yorichi's original katana means that it can handle the amount of strain that sun breathing does to a Nichiren blade. On to the battle with Upper Moon 4, which was kind of an odd one and somewhat hard to gauge because technically the true form and the one that gets finished last wasn't the strongest. Tanjiro fights Urogi once they're separated, which is the flying one that reminds me of Curse Mark 2 Sasuke. Tanjiro impales him and they both go through the building where the others are and they're finally reunited. I thought this was hilarious, I don't know why, but when Tanjiro stops the staff with Urogi's foot, I was dying laughing. But anyway, he uses it to avoid being damaged by the lightning. Nezuko's blood lights up his blade and it turns red, which is then starts spooking the demons because of Muzan's repressed memory. And boom, he unleashes the nastiest Hinokami Kagura to date and beheads 3 of the current demons, with the 4th being defeated by Genya. Now I guess you could say that no, that wasn't just his power, but his sister as well. I agree, she contributes quite a bit, but based on how straining sun breathing was on him prior, Tanjiro still had to become strong enough to wield the flame, as well as perform the dance itself. Just basing it off of the difficulty he had in trying to cut both Rui, who was pathetic at this point in comparison to Upper Moon 4, and of course the final blow on Gyutaro, showcases at the very least that Tanjiro is really freaking powerful now. This fight starts getting a little more convoluted, and since there's so many players in it, I'll just jump to the end since it's not really a showcase of his strength anymore. It's more of a game of hide and seek with the real body, since they weren't really close to even killing Zohokuten. All Kanroji did was dodge, and even with her Demon Slayer mark. Post Hashira training, Tanjiro is basically a monster and a key instrument for Muzan's destruction in the final battle. This is pretty much final Tanjiro, and I'll go ahead and go over this now. We'll have to jump to the Akaza fight where him and Giyu face off against him. So at the beginning of the Akaza fight, Tanjiro establishes that he's much stronger than he was before since he's able to easily damage/cut Akaza's arm. The GOAT Giyu even drops him a compliment stating how strong he has become. Once Akaza activates Compass Needle, Giyu pretty much leads the fight because Tanjiro can no longer land clean hits until a neck touch and a headbutt when Akaza was trying to break his blade. Giyu eventually starts struggling with Akaza because of the fighting spirit mechanic. Tanjiro actually figures out how this works and eventually unlocks the see-through world or transparent world technique, which is the peak of a Demon Slayer's power. Once this is unlocked, Akaza can no longer sense Tanjiro's battle spirit and loses his hand when he attempts to donut Giyu. Tanjiro does one of the dumbest things ever, yelling he will cut off his head, which Giyu notes, which is hilarious, but it wouldn't have mattered if he chopped his head off right there anyway, as he just does it in the next panel regardless. Then Giyu yeets his head into the wall, and yeah, it's pretty much over after that. Then you get to the headless Akaza attacking, then he ices himself after he realizes that he's becoming something he does not want to be. And I just wanted to say this is a gigantic milestone, as Akaza previously is the standard for the unstoppable force in the show besides Muzan. Now jumping to final battle Tanjiro, he is basically the combination of every trait built up until this point. His most impressive feat is perfectly performing the 13th form dance of the fire god and turning the Nichiren blade red without Nezuko's help. Being able to do the 13 forms in succession despite some struggle is freaking amazing, considering what his entire character arc had to go through, starting from almost passing out after one strike. Also, the plan originally was to perform the dance until freaking dawn the next day. I could talk about the fight more, but it's mostly the other Hashira shining and Tanjiro performing the dance to permanently damage Muzan. And besides becoming the Demon King, he doesn't get any other unique power up. By the end of the series, he's pretty much the perfect Demon Slayer, can perform the most powerful breathing style, especially offensively, and he can perform the defensive and slick water breathing style. FYI, I'm gonna cover Demon King Tanjiro in a separate video, as I think it deserves its own special section, and since it's gonna be a lot of headcanon / theory crafting, which should be fun. And yeah, that's the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If so, please give your boy a like and go ahead and sub up if you're new, and then I'll see y'all on the next one.